Now, in many YouTube videos, you're going to see comparisons of today's real estate market to the real estate market of the Great Recession in 2008. I thought what we'd do in today's video is let's look at some actual numbers from the Omaha real estate market going back to 2008 and compare those numbers to what we have today. And we're going to get started right now. My name is David Matney with Nebraska Realty. I'm a local realtor here in Omaha, Nebraska. Now let's jump into today's topic. Let's first look at the interest rate for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage starting back in 2005. Now, back in those years, just prior to the Great Recession, mortgage interest rates were around the 6 to 7% range. And guess what? People were still buying homes. Now, as the Great Recession hit, you see interest rates dropped, which makes sense. The economy took a hit. They lower interest rates in order to stimulate the economy. Now, rates remained low in the 4 to 5% range over the next 10 years. I think what's interesting is that prior to the Great Recession, interest rates were above 6%. Then for the last decade, we've been spoiled with really low mortgage interest rates. Remember, the real estate market was one of the major contributors of the Great Recession. Now let's look at home prices in the Omaha market during this time. We're going to look at Douglas and Sarpy County. Now remember, when news organizations publish stories, they always look for extremes. Now think back, if you lived in Omaha at the time, do you remember any major news outlet like CNN or anyone else like that doing stories about the Omaha real estate market? No, they talked about, Phoenix, they've talked about Las Vegas. And why is that? Because bad news sells. Omaha doesn't get invited to the party, so we don't experience the high highs and the low lows. So our market and our economy is very stable, especially look at our major industries within the city. A lot of our major industries are in the healthcare industry, and those tend to be very stable jobs. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back and look at Douglas and Sarpy County, and we're going to look at three things. We're going to look at the number of closed transactions for the year. We're going to look at the median closed sales price and the median days on market. And I think you're going to find this somewhat interesting. Okay, if we're going to look at the Great Recession numbers, we're also going to look at the years just prior to the Great Recession in 2005 and 2006. Now, if you look at those years, we had over 10,000 transactions, and the median closed sales price at that time was $142,000 and $145,000. The median days on market was right around 30 days on the market. Okay, then you start to see in 2007, the sales decline. So we didn't have as many transactions. And you also see the median closed sales price went from $145,000 to $143,120. And we also see the days on market increase to 41 days on the market. Then let's look at the years from 2008 to 2012. During those years, you see the price decline. 2009, that was our lowest. The price got down to $137,500. And the transactions during those years between 2007 and 2012 remained below 10,000 closed transactions. And again, during those years, it took a home longer to sell. And what's interesting about those years, I was in real estate at the time, and when times get a little bit tougher, there's a flight to quality. Sellers at that time were looking for quality agents, because, anybody can sell a home when the market's good, but when the market gets tough, they're looking for quality agents. And I had some of my best years during that time because sellers at that time, if they needed to sell, they didn't mess around. And again, it's an agent that sells a home, not a company. Now, what did we see starting in 2013? We see the number of sales increase, and then look at the days on market. It went from 36, 2014, you see prices increasing, and you see those years, 2014, 15, and 16, and 17, what's happening to those days on market are decreasing. And then look at the median closed sales price. Look at those numbers increase each year. So starting in 2011, we have increased every year since 2011 in the median closed sales price. And look at our days on market. Look at 2021. We had over 13,968 closed transactions in Douglas and Sarpy County. The median closed sales price was $255,000, and the median days on market was 3 days on the market. Now, I think there's a lot of hype when, people talk about the Great Recession and the real estate crash and that sort of thing. But in the Omaha market, our price went from 2006 of $145,000 to a low of, in 2009, of $137,500. Now, what happened at the time is, the people that had to move. If they incurred a life event, they went ahead and moved. But if somebody just was thinking about it or wanting to move, but it wasn't a have to, then they stayed in their homes a little bit longer. And again, in any market, there's going to be sales. During the height of the Great Recession, we still had over 8,000 closed transactions in Douglas and Sarpy County. So there's always going to be a real estate market. And I think people need to be careful because there's a lot of real estate videos out there that, talk about the real estate market collapsing and we're in a bubble. But as you can see, in every year, there seems to be talk of a real estate bubble. So in 2013, if you thought there was a real estate bubble, guess what? You would still be waiting. And guess what? The market completely passed you by. Now, another thing that I think is real interesting is looking at the math. In 2006, interest rates were around 6.5% for a 30-year loan. Now, if you were to take the median sale price of $145,000, and let's say you were financing the entire amount of 100%, your principal and interest payment would be $916.50. In 2020, interest rates dipped to around 3% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Now, if you were to take the median sale price in 2020 of $232,500 and you were to finance 100% of it, your principal and interest payment would only be $990.77. So even though the price was up more than $100,000, your payment did not increase very much because those low interest rates during the pandemic gave buyers a tremendous amount of buying power that they were able to buy a much more expensive home. So many people focus on house price and not on payment. Now, when money is so cheap, buyers are going to come out of the woodwork to buy a home. And that's what we saw. We saw home prices skyrocket because we had such a high demand because of the low interest rates. Now we have rates that are increasing. I think what you're going to see going forward is you're going to see, just like we saw in the past, you're going to see the number of sales decrease and you're going to see the time on market increase. Will the price of homes crash? Probably not. Because here's the other thing too. Builders get a sense of prices softening. They'll just simply hit the pause button. They don't want to be in a position where they have to lower prices because they have to move inventory. Builders will not build unless they have a buyer for that newly built home. It's just like a grocery store. Okay, if a grocery store already has product on the shelf, they're not going to go to the warehouse and order more product to be delivered because they already have too much on the shelf. Again, builders kind of have to look into the future and they have to try to estimate demand in the future for their product. Now, the goal of a builder is to make money. Now, keep this in mind too. When a newly built home is a collection of commodities, for example, the price of lumber, copper, oil, all play a part in building a home. The cost of labor is also part of the equation. In order to build a home, the builder has to make a profit. The sale price has to be greater than the cost to build in order for the builder to make a living. In the Great Recession of 2008, what we saw was a lot of builders went out of business because they were out over their skis and they had too much inventory and not enough buyers to buy those newly built homes. Now, all these, statistics are interesting and everything like that, but when you really peel things back and you're going to be buying a home, I think it boils down to a couple of things. Number one, are your finances in order? Do you have some savings set aside in reserve? If you're buying a home, you got to have some money set aside, not just for the down payment and the closing costs and maintenance, but you got to have a little bit of money set aside for a rainy day fund just in case you do get laid off or you lose your job. And then it goes back to how stable is your job? If you lost your job, how quickly could you replace your income? And the second thing it boils down to is how long are you going to stay in the home? If you buy a home and you have to turn around and sell it a year later or 2 years later, you may be in that situation better off renting. But if you buy a home and stay in it 5 to 10 years, you're probably going to be just fine as long as you maintain the property. Now, if you're a seller, the thing you have to to understand is that markets do change. For some sellers, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow because they're going to be, well, my neighbor sold the house down the street in one day and they had 15 offers. In any market, homes sell for market value. And at the time, that was the market. Now, if you want to learn more about selling a home, hey, be sure to check out this video next, and you make it a great day.